Welcome to another philosophical conversation. I think we're in for a real treat with this podcast today, as I'm inviting on not only a economist, psychotherapist, coach, trainer, and now author, but also a good friend and a friend who helped me a lot throughout my doctoral studies, and always was a very warm heart, and always very, very welcoming to me at a time in my life when I was in a new place. Let's say in a very, what I think will be very meta for this conversation, when I was in an unknown place, and moving into a new dimension and confronting a new part of myself. So I'm welcoming Jon Echanove. His writing, as I said, he's an author. His writing aims to show the depth of the process of change where ordinary people face novelty, loss, and creation. And specifically, we're going to be here to talk about his new book, The Angle of Happiness, which we'll be discussing at length. So welcome, Jon. Great to have you here. And why don't you introduce yourself a little bit?
Well, welcome, Kader. Yeah, thank you very much for giving me a space in your podcast, which is really a pleasure. I was delighted with your offer and very happy to be here. What about myself that you haven't said so far? Not much. I think that probably the thing that is relevant for the conversation today, I think relevant for the way I engage with the process of writing, is that I've been very lucky to travel around the world for work mainly, but I've been in many different places. I have lived in different countries, including China and the Philippines, and I think that has been a very important part of my way of understanding people and relationships, and a part of me has always wanted to bring that into the stories that I write, and I think that in a way is linked with what you were saying about the exploration of novelty, and I think that being in new cultures, in new places, as you were when we met, like many of us, that we arrived to a new place, it is a very interesting experience, and it can bring a lot understanding of who we are and how we engage with people. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's interesting to sort of reflect on the dimensions of what a global culture we're a part of now, having sort of cultivated a lifetime. I'd imagine a few centuries ago, it would be not only, of course, very strange to be having a podcast like this, but to be engaging with so many people who've been exposed to so many different cultures and exposed to so many different languages and so many different ways of life on a planetary scale. And that's a huge part of, I think, what you're exploring in the book as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's amazing and fascinating. For me, China has always been a very attractive place to go, and recently I gave a talk about China, and I was trying to identify the first time that I heard about it as a place of curiosity. And I have a very vague memory of watching the news on Spain, in Madrid, in the late or mid 80s. And there was an image of a park in Beijing, and somehow the news was that was the first time that foreign media was allowed to shoot images of Beijing, because that was the opening. And at that time I thought, oh, wow, China, this mysterious, so far away. And in the course of my life, suddenly the world shrunk, and China moved from being a mysterious, completely far away, a dream in a way, a distant land. I felt like Marco Polo. Really, it's so far away, and suddenly it's part of our of our daily life for many of us, and that includes not only China. I mean, the world itself suddenly became very accessible for many of us.
Depending on capitalist relations,
yeah, totally.
at least in part.
Totally. Yeah, of course, and maybe what we're seeing now is a pendulous movement, no? That the world is becoming farther apart now, no? In the last 3 years,
Yes.
accelerated with the pandemic, nothing is so close anymore. Yeah, and there is a part of me that is sad about that. There's another part of me that, probably because I have traveled so much around the world, that actually I don't want to do it anymore. It's like, beauty is just there in your neighbor, in the garden, just there. That is what beauty is. So there's no point in going anywhere. And that feels really good. It's like, but at the same time, I felt really good in those early 2000s where we were all world citizens, no, and we have forgotten about geopolitics for a while, and now it's back on the table for all of us.
No, I think that's a very important observation that you're making. I mean, the way I would come at that observation a little bit is that there, after the Cold War, there was the opening of a sort of a liberalist utopia of multicultural travel. We go to Japan a little bit, we go to Spain a little bit, we go to Brazil a little bit, and stuff like that. And we're, and this type of notion that the world is open. But I do think it's the case, what you're pointing out in the last few years, perhaps a shock of the global, like that actually, it's not just sort of we get to have sushi and we get to have tacos, but actually there's global viruses, and the other is a threatening other, and the diversity is too much, and the multiculturalism presents us with differences which are too much for our cognition to comprehend and integrate and synthesize.
Absolutely. I think that, being a person who has embraced cultural diversity, my family, coming from many different cultures, living in other countries, I've always valued diversity, cultural diversity a lot. But I totally agree with you. I think that it comes with a cost. It's not for free. And managing, integrating cultural diversity, it is very, very, very hard. And it requires an enormous effort, and it requires an enormous willingness to stop being who you are culturally. You cannot integrate other cultures just by putting boundaries between you and the others. And I think that, as you said, I think that we have reached a point where we just can't take it anymore. There's a lot of people that suddenly get back to very traditional values, the flag, my country, and I think that part of it is just I cannot change anymore. I don't know anymore how to integrate so many things in a way that is more or less homogeneous and more than homogeneous, that is stable. Yeah, I think that's more so there is a reaction against that cultural diversity, and I think that it was a naivety amongst many of us that it is possible. You can be as diverse as you want. We will do a super party with everybody here, and there will be common understanding every time because we just need to talk and be open. Yeah.
No, yeah. That's exactly that's I think your body language and your facial expressions communicate a depth there, which is very important. And I think in my last conversation actually with Dr. Richard Boothby on Embracing the Void, he talks about actually the trauma of the neighbor. And actually, I think that the in a psychoanalytic sense, and also you could frame it in a Christian sense, like the ethic of to love thy neighbor, and the neighbor is actually not the guy next door watering his plants. It's like, the state over there, which is the alien state, the alien other. The neighbor is like the someone who's really other to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's what's coming down on us now, and it's interesting to think about your book in that sense. But let's dive into a little bit specifically about the major themes of the angle of happiness. And I'm sure this theme of the other and the global will reappear. Can you tell us a little bit? I mean, just from a basic overview of the novel, it's trying to find happiness, but also to break away from the old and to go into the unknown and to confront the new. And can you tell us a little bit about the major themes so people can get a sense of what's going on here?
Yes, I think that the original idea was trying to explore the potential for change that discovering a new place or moving to a new place, a new culture can have on a person. Yeah, and one of the elements that I was trying to describe or at least to explore to the best I could is that for many of us, when we move to a new culture, to a new country, we start from zero, and that zero includes the relationship with others. Yeah? So there are no assumptions about who you are. There is no baggage about the things you've done. You just engage with people fully in the present. This is what I am. This person has never seen you. There might be stereotypes about your culture or things like that, but not on a personal level. Yeah, I mean, and I think that one of the main things was to what extent a person can rebuild himself or herself, starting anew somewhere else. Yeah, and if you do, how do you think about yourself? And what are the things that change evokes in you? And so that was on the one hand. The link to that, I think that I wanted to explore the possibility of novelty as a path for healing trauma. Because many of us, when we stay in the same context all the time, we are permanently revisiting and re-experiencing our micro traumas or little traumas, precisely because we're in a context that is aware of our trauma. Yeah? So your friends, your family, everybody's aware to some extent of what you have suffered, and so there is small reminders permanently about that. But when you move to a new place, those reminders might not be there for you, and when that happens, then maybe there is an angle for you to heal and to look at that differently. And I think that comes for the title, no? So that you have the opportunity to look at life from a different angle, and maybe a more generous angle, and maybe an angle to happiness. Maybe there's a possibility for that. I think that was the second idea. There was a third element that for me was very important that I was very eager to share, is that I was obviously very lucky. I'm married to a Chinese, so I was fortunate to look at China from a very different perspective than many other people, even of my colleagues going to China, because I could really escape from the big cities and from the big geopolitics or even the cultural stereotypes to live with ordinary Chinese in both in the city and in the small places. And I wanted to offer the things I saw. I wanted to describe as accurately as possible that other China, that China that it is just filled with ordinary people, and what is that about? How they live, and what are the expectations, the daily lives, the constraints from the culture itself, the traditional culture. So that was an element that I found important. And I think that the final theme, at least that I work on while thinking on the story and the characters, was about the complexity of parents-children relationship, and the baggage that it brings to all of us in an unconscious or conscious way, but that it comes to us in a particular way that sometimes is heavy, and how one fights or not that heaviness, and how it defines our choices. I think that's the main areas.
Yeah, no, I think you covered very comprehensively there many important angles of your book. And actually one of the most profound things that's hitting me in opening up the conversation with you, having read the book, but then there's something different when you're reading something, and then when you're talking about something. It's like something new opens up. But specifically in the conversation here with you, I feel like it's very meta having this conversation with you, just because this book is so much about starting from zero, and like you're saying, starting from zero and going to a place and rebuilding from scratch, and that's inclusive of others, and that's very much the context in which you found me. Is that like that was, so I'm just experiencing that sort of that meta dimension in the conversation. But it's very true that when you're grounded in a certain place, when you're grounded in a certain familial network, when you're grounded in a certain region which you've maybe never even left, maybe saw pictures or whatever, or maybe you've gone on a 2-week vacation or something like that. It's very different to pick up your life and actually start from zero in a new place, and to rebuild all those relationships. And I think by definition, you can't but get a totally, as you're saying in the book, a totally different angle or perspective on yourself. And as just coming up at the very epilogue of your book, now to start at the end, in the very epilogue of your book, you say, you do go, so you will just say for the readers, you start in Madrid, you go to Beijing, and then in the epilogue, you're back in Madrid. And you just say, I've changed. Like, you just have a totally different perception of yourself. You have a totally different angle on yourself. And so can you speak a little bit about, what's going on there in this perspective shift?
I think that for me, the epilogue was about, obviously the character Juan has gone through different different events that have shaped him in one direction or the other. But when it comes to the end, I think that what we wanted to capture is that eventually change can only happen if you own it. And if you are aware that whatever change that you can implement, just taking advantage of a new environment or whatever situation, eventually you have to enact it. You have to choose to change. And I think that is what I was trying to evoke in the epilogue, that he is aware that he has made choices in the past that were constrained by his context, his family life, and that at that time those choices felt absolute. This is the only possible choice because you are embedded in that environment. I think that the experience for him abroad in China, in Beijing, gradually allows him to realize that those were just choices, that there was no determinism in an absolute way. There were consistent choices with him and with the environment he was living in, but he could have made another ones. He didn't, and I don't think that he evokes guilt about it. It's just a realization that actually you can. But maybe because you haven't lived in other contexts, you are unaware that you could have chosen differently. And I think that's for me the end of it, that he is aware that there is a path for happiness. Maybe he doesn't know yet what it is, but he is aware, and that he is a player in that. Yeah, he's not just receiving it as this is my life, and whether good or bad is what it is. No, he is an agent in that. Maybe, yeah, he cannot change everything, and that's and that is possibly the message, you know, that he can, that someone can be happy in spite of ourselves, no, that we can overcome ourselves in a way.
And that's, I mean, I'm just reflecting there on the dimension you're emphasizing about the realization that he's not merely a passive recipient of the world.
Yeah.
And because if we take the beginning of the book, you know, I just want to contextualize the beginning of the book in sort of opening to your unique writing style, is that, well, first saying at the beginning of the book, there is this sense of this passivity. There is this sense of Juan, the main character, as a passive recipient of many things going on around him, which are quite depressing and give you a sense of negativity around him, and a sense that there's a hopelessness that you can feel a little bit. But I just want to sort of also comment on the way in which, you know, you're writing this character in this book, that I want to say it's a very personal book, which I appreciate very much. And specifically, like, what I appreciate about the writing is that you get into the cracks of the mind and day-to-day life very much, and you touch dimensions of the mind in day-to-day life, which are oftentimes like in a lot of like say fancy movies or books are just not, are not in the picture at all. You know, so like just for example, you know, what is it like to be longing for the end of a work shift, or waiting for the bus, or sitting in the living room watching TV in a sort of a dark situation, or like you know, the intimacy of the sexual mind, you know, like watching porn before going to sleep, and all of the emotions that are coming up actually inside of us in those moments. I think you touch them very intimately and very in a way that I personally appreciate. But, you know, do you want to just open up a little bit about what's going on there in the context of your main character being this passive recipient of the world around him, and what's going on there?
Well, thank you for pointing that out. It's because I think it is for me a very important point in building characters and stories, is that the true personality normally is not shown in fabulous events that just suddenly there are aliens landing on Earth, and how you react to that. Probably we will react all very similarly. I think that if you want to describe a person, you have to describe a person in the little things of life, and in the little pleasures and the little displeasures, and how I handle myself in those little things. How I handle myself when I'm impatient because the bus is late, or because suddenly my brother or my mother is annoying me when I want to see a movie, whatever it is. What is going on for me in that moment, and how I experience my emotions, it says more about me than the very extreme scenarios where I do. And very importantly, most of us, we remember things as a result of little events. Maybe you see a movie and reminds you of something of your childhood. Why not? But very often not. Very often you just walk in the street and you see a car turns out that is similar to the car your father had, and immediately you flow into a series of memories about that. And that's how life goes. No? Or someone asks you about your school, and immediately you back to that teacher, yeah, and that's what I wanted to capture in describing the characters, and indeed I think that particularly when we're talking about trauma, one of the things of trauma is that makes you a victim by the experience of trauma itself. And when you're a victim, the experience of being a victim is that you have lost the power. Yeah, and that's the passiveness that you were describing. No, yeah, in being traumatized by my experience, I also has weakened my capacity to know that I have in me the capacity for something. Yeah, and maybe not for a big change or just heal yourself, but at least for something. I think that is still a place where the main character Juan is not. He's in a place where he's just coping with the trauma as a victim, as the only possible choice for him in that environment, and therefore he's not fighting. I mean, I wouldn't say that the word is fighting, probably is the wrong word, because he's in a way content. I mean, he's not striving for anything different. Simply, yeah, this is what it is, and in my fantasy I will stay here forever and it would be just okay. Yeah, I mean,
like a complacency.
Yeah, that's exactly the word. No, it's just these are the cards that have been dealt with, and yeah, and I have
and
to live.
This permeates all those little things, like
Yeah.
you're saying. This trauma permeates, and you capture that as that, you know. And I also love your emphasis on when we're describing a person, specifically in the context. I mean, in you're writing a book of fiction, is that when we're trying to tell a story, basically, that you capture a person in those micro moments. You know, it's like I'm reflecting on the emotion that makes me want to go and get a chocolate bar, or I'm reflecting on the emotion that I don't want to wash the dishes or something. You know, these little minutiae are actually there's a spiritual richness in reflecting on that.
Yes, and in particular in this character, because is a person that is not very much in touch with the source of his emotional life. I mean, he has the emotions, but he has not yet gone deep to why I have this emotion. He's just taking it for granted, no? And I think that it was important because many of those elements that are daily life encounters have connections with some emotions that are at the origin of the trauma. Yeah, so both the positives and the negatives. No? And I think that as the novel evolves, the connection is clearer. No, that the memories start becoming more concise. At the beginning, are very blurry, and he starts to remember more details around those things, but the emotions are similar. He's just being able to bring more content to those memories.
Absolutely, and it's actually, you know, you get a new appreciation for the beginning at the end, and in some sense, after you've sort of, you know, it's kind of like, you know, when you're reading something for the first time or you're watching something for the first time, you obviously don't know how the story is going to unfold, but then those same moments that you read about in the beginning are new. Like, I'm specifically in the context of your book, I'm thinking about that memory that Juan has where, and maybe we should introduce some of the characters first, but I'm thinking about the memory that Juan has of his mother calling him a saint, and specifically Juan sort of becoming a self-sacrificing son. And just sort of go into a little bit about what is the context in the beginning of the book where Juan is this? It seems to me to be very focused on an unfortunate familial situation with very complex social dynamics with the mother, with the father, with the brother, with the sister.
Yeah. Yes. I think that Juan is a prisoner of good intentions. No, I mean, I think that he sees himself as a helping hand for the family, and while he doesn't fully enjoy that, he sees the value of it. He sees the value in both his mother and sister, who is mentally handicapped person who requires a lot of attention and work and constrained enormously the social life of both the mother and Juan. Yeah, at the beginning of the book, it's difficult to know, I guess, for the reader fully why he's there and why he's, and I hope that gets clearer as you move along in the book. But he's a person that just has found his place in a very difficult family context, and once you have found your place in a social context, it's very difficult to give it up. Yeah, this is the label, this is the thing you're good at, and he just take up that role. It doesn't demand enormously. I mean, it fits with his introverted character, so it's not like it's an odd role for him. It's just a role of being supporting the mother and the sister that is comfortable for him, because it's not forcing him to expose his weaknesses, no, his social awkwardness, his insecurity. He's protected by his own narrative in a way. As long as I'm here, then I don't have to confront the other world that I'm scared of. Yeah, and he's not aware of that. No? But there's something you said that I think is also when you say that as you read the book, then it makes you think about the beginning. I thank you for that, because and I'm happy that you experience it that way. There's one of the things that I think is lacking in a lot of stories, whether it's novels or movies, is that now everything is presented immediately. Yeah, this is the character, this is what they do, this is whatever it is, and they just put the character in action. But you don't have to discover the character. Yeah, you just this is the person as it is, and it's going through a series of adventures. But you don't know more about as the person evolves. It's consistent with what you've been told at the beginning. Yeah, which is okay. But I don't think that is the truth in how we or the experience of discovering people in our real life. You meet Cadell and he tells you something about, I say something, and then that's all you know. Then you carry on, meet again for a coffee, and you added information that is also contextualizing the things that you have heard before. Yeah, and I think that is also something I try to do in all the books, not only in this one. That you, the more you spend time with the character, the more things you know that justifies what you have heard before. Yeah,
I think it's really well said. And just because I want to put this into sort of the context of things that are going on in philosophy, Bordeaux. One of the I'm teaching the science of logic, and one of the principal distinctions in the science of logic is the concepts of immediacy and mediation. And so in the context of what you were saying, I think that we do have a tendency in contemporary literature, movies, stories, to present characters in their immediacy without thinking about the mediation of those characters. And I think that that's something that also comes through in your book, is that the Juan you meet at the beginning of the book is very different from the Juan at the end of the book, even though what's interesting is there is this journey, you know, from a home and back home in some sense. There's this, the story is really the mediation, where you don't have a fully fledged complete character just with explosions and adventures in the background or something like that, but you're following Juan through the cracks where that mediation occurs.
Yes. I absolutely. I mean, I think that if I think we discover things, not only in the book, I mean, in general, we discover things by the small reactions to small events. Yeah, and that's how you build an image of something or someone, and it's an ongoing action. Yeah, you don't obviously you have your initial conditions in how you meet that particular object or person, but it's the process engaging with the person that eventually builds an image of what that person is. And coming back to the beginning of a conversation, I don't know how, but sometimes the images has so many data, so many events, it's so well built around yourself that you're a prisoner of that image. Yeah, and that is the beauty of being able to move abroad to another place, that you escape a narrative that has been with you and with your context for decades, and it has so many inputs, so many data that is congruent with that image that you cannot just mentally forget about it. Yeah? You need you cannot fight it. You know, mentally or cognitively, it's just impossible. You can't. You have to experience a different person, a different John, or a different Cadel, or a different Juan, to start getting data that it is not consistent with that narrative, to move to a different level of understanding. Otherwise, you're always stuck in that specific mediation. Yeah,
Yeah, totally. And you know what I want to focus on a little bit in that context is Juan at the beginning has a certain self-image, let's say he's complacent and so forth. Specifically, it seems to me that there's a certain negativity which breaks the image. There seems to be an image shattering that does occur and play some role in in changing his life, basically, and taking up the challenge of starting from zero, in your language. Could you go into, and to go into that, what you call, I think, a crucial dark moment of the book, could speak a little bit on it. It involves misinformation, lying, manipulation, concealment, shame, around sexuality, family members, all that type of stuff. Can you go into a little bit about that image shattering and what's involved there, what you're trying to communicate there?
So one of the I think that one of the challenges growing up as an adult is that that when you're younger, you take the world as face value, yeah. But the world that has been offered to you, there's no analysis. Yeah, you're telling you this is what has happened and this is what it is. The same way that you believe in Santa Claus or whatever it is, you just take it in, and rarely there is a revision of the main narratives of a family. Yeah? And events have to happen for things. And unless there is a revision for that, for many of us, you grew up just believing what you have seen as a truth, but what I wanted to use or to express is that there is a lot of naivety in how we remember our family life. A naivety, not in the sense that our family lives are necessarily bad, but that that we all grew up loving our parents somewhere or another, and we don't have other parents, so we can't compare. We live in a neighborhood and we think a neighborhood is fantastic because we haven't lived in another neighborhood. We have, all of us, great memories of particular food that was cooked in a particular moment as the best food ever, but you know, that was the only food available. So you have all these elements that are absolute truths that gradually change. But when it comes to the relationship with our family members, those truths are more difficult to change because they are very important to us. Yeah? And sometimes they're broken by family secrets. Yeah, and that is when many families tend to, definitely in the Southern European culture, I think in general, but the family secrets are just placed in a cupboard, and we don't talk about that much, and because we don't talk about that, children growing up are not aware of those family secrets, and how they have shaped certain elements of the family life, which they have taken as truth and just immutable, disconnected with any particular event. And I think that's what I wanted to evoke in the book, that when there is a family secret and the family secret explodes or is discussed in the open, then there is a possibility that you think and say, oh, so actually all the things that I was thinking that was the normal way to behave, it has a completely different reason. It has nothing to do with me or with you know, it has to do with a secret. And on top of that, all these people, my parents, brothers, sisters, that were very nice people, turn out to be less nice. And what do I do with that? Yeah, what do I do with that information that has been intentionally hidden, maybe to protect me, maybe to protect the whole family context, whatever is the reason? Nobody wants to talk about the mistakes we make, and then when the mistake accidentally is known, then there is for Juan is it's a terrible moment, because his health image has been about being helpful and being given, to and
self-sacrificing,
sacrificing for the family. And it's like, hold on, so
what am I sacrificing for?
Exactly, no? And are the others doing anything similar to what I'm doing here? I mean,
right.
Am
I the only one making this sacrifice? And
yes, and one is striving to be so good. If everybody is not half of it, it's like, why do I have to be at this level? And I think it's the first time that he challenged that I don't have to be there. Yeah, or why do I have to? Not necessarily that I have to, like, but and I think that it breaks the image that he's a young adult invested in helping the mother and the sister, with a sense of it's a difficult relationship with both, but at the same time there is an element that he accepts certain purity on them, that they are more unlucky than he is, in a way, but when the family secret is discovered, is exposed, the purity disappears completely. All the I think that I intentionally brought the ugliness of the sexuality, of the abuse, and suddenly those two people he was helping and pure and just suffering, good-hearted people, are embedded in a context that is far dirtier than he had ever thought, in an area that he's completely scared and naive, which is sex. Is an area for which he's just incapable to relate in a natural way. So partially because of the social context in which he lives. and that's too much for him. It's too ugly, it's too unknown, too difficult for him, and changes the image of his family members, and that changes his image too. I'm not sure if it is the image. It just.
Well, I want you to comment a little. I'd be interested in what stuck out to me, what came out in the narrative with that event specifically was, and actually, to be honest, this I think was Juan's retroactive reflection after the mediation, was related to decency and self-dignity.
Yeah.
Like that seemed to come out. I wonder if what do you make of that?
I see Juan as a very contained person. So that there is an element of his life, particularly his sexual desire and his sexuality, his intimacy at large.
Yes, yeah.
That is very contained.
Yes.
He finds it very hard to communicate and to express that intimacy, and not to mention the physical part of it.
And has big hopes inside of himself.
Yeah. Because I mean, like, I imagine, like any one of us, there is a natural desire for that intimacy. It's a very comforting, and it's very reassuring, particularly when it gives us a lot of self-confidence when you're able to give that intimacy and receive back the same. No? It validates who you are as a person, and on top of that, the physical contact, the physicality of it is so it exposes you so much that the acceptance of that is very comforting. But he never had that, and he's very insecure about that element. When you know more about the family, it makes sense that he has a person with such a limited exposure to that, and I think that when you talk about dignity, I think that in him there is an external part that he controls, which is the way he behaves at work and family, and another part that he suppresses, except when he's alone, in his loneliness, which is his desires, and a big part of those desires is a sexual desire. Yeah, he has this. He fantasizes about the possibility of just breaking through and being able to express love and desire in a natural way, which he has never done, and he doesn't know how to do. And I think that that event, what probably confuses him a bit is that because it's related to sex, to sexuality, and which is an area that he has suppressed so much. I think that what he says is, so if no one is suppressing it, and I look at it as an ugly part of me, because I don't know what to do with it, but turns out that I'm the only imbecile here that it is suppressing that thing that I feel as ugly, that is not, it's not dignified. It's a part of me that is, but everybody's doing it, and there is a sense of unfairness for him, that he's been trying to hide a part of him that he identifies as ugly because he doesn't know what to do with it, but then it's everywhere, and it is in his immediate family context, and I think that that's the thing where he finds himself. I am being so pure. I've strived so hard to contain myself in this area that it feels disturbing to me. And it turns out that I'm the only one doing that effort.
I think it's profound. I mean, spend some time reflecting on what's going on here, because I think these psychological dynamics are interesting to go into the cracks of them. I mean, there is this relation that you had already articulated about one in the context of the child, like the child's mind growing up, of the absolute good.
Mm.
And and then the more you understand about the world, the more that becomes relativized. It's things around, and also in the context of the negative familial situation with sexuality, that the good and the purity is always looking for some sort of a scapegoat. Like, is it the father? Is it the brother? Is it the mother? Is it me? Is it, it's looking for someone to blame, someone to that would reduce the complexity and the messiness of the situation.
Yes, absolutely. I think one of the if you look at the family, the mother is a very religious person, and the idea for me of very religious person is precisely a person that also needs to limit the complexity of reality. That it has believing faith is a way to just find an answer that works for you, and just period. I don't want to fight anymore with the uncertainty of not knowing and not having any clue of what is good or bad, or and I think that fits Juan. He has less of this magical thinking than the mother, but he's comfortable in his insecurity. He's comfortable in a stable place where what is good behavior, what is not bad behavior, what is expected from me and what is not expected for him, is very well defined and rigid. I mean, and that rigidity for him, who is absolutely terrified of going outside to the world, is very comforting. And I think that that's part of the things, whether while he leaves that as a victim, at the same time, psychologically, is his defense mechanism. He is never aiming to break away from that situation, because, going away is facing an uncertainty that he's not prepared to deal with. And I think that he's completely unaware of it, and yes. I think he's self-justified whatever is going on for him, but the reality is that he is comfortable in that context also because in that family scenario where he's the helping hand, he's the breadwinner, he is not challenged, and both the mother and at no point he is checked in his behavior. It's just, you're a good boy, you're a helping hand, right? And you do whatever you want.
I think Juan actually in that this as a case study almost for the increasingly interesting relationship in my mind between psychoanalysis and religion, because like you said, on the one hand, the mother is explicitly religious in her identity, and Juan, it doesn't seem explicitly religious. In fact, Juan doesn't necessarily have a positive view of religion. But the thing is that, and this is the interesting thing about psychoanalysis, is that the unconscious believes for him.
Absolutely. He inherits from that the rigid dimensions of good, bad, the ethics, the morality, in a very unconscious way. Amongst them, the purity and the sexual repression, but he's not even aware of it. He just doesn't know what to do with it because he has nothing to talk about, or never has ever. So, and those things are just building blocks of something that is just not completely away from his consciousness. But he is aware that he cannot relate with religion as the mother does. It feels too childish for him, too old-fashioned. And probably he would not describe himself as a religious person. And still, he believes in very specific structures of what is good, what is bad. And that is the crisis. When those structures start cracking, you have to build something. He has to take action because he has to fill those gaps with something. Yeah, and he cannot, because the cracks are within the family context, his only context. He cannot rely on his family to fill those gaps. He has to find something different.
And ultimately, he does take a jump into the unknown. Yeah. Ultimately, he does go into the gap. He goes to the zero level. So, you know, what will be, I think, really interesting is to talk about in this transition, ultimately, from a character in Madrid who is trapped in an unfortunate familial situation, a passive recipient of the world around him, confronting the gap, confronting the void, going into the unknown, going to the other side of the planet, quite literally, to China. And in his first trip to China, to Beijing, there's an explosion of a negative sexual situation. So, which is very, I mean, I think that would be interesting to talk about specifically in the context of what we've been talking about, where you have a repressed sexuality and you think you're trying to be good and you think this is ugly. And then it seems to me almost like a return of the repressed, because like the repressed comes out and he doesn't know what to do with it. And it's kind of like a crucial moment of the book, I think.
It is. I think that if I imagine Juan and that loss of references in terms of purity, particularly when it comes to sexuality, and realizing that everybody's somehow ahead of him in the understanding and the experience and the exposure to that, and he feels like just lagging behind. Yeah, and when he goes to China, what he over-interprets something that he cannot interpret, which is the clues or the behavior of a woman, because he has no relationship with women. He has no idea what he's doing. But he is in this mood that everybody is actually enjoying this ugliness. So I want to be part of it, and I let my desire take over my behavior, without paying any attention to how it is received by the other. No, just completely focus on satisfying that repressed desire that he thinks everybody has already satisfied except him in the world. Yeah, and I think it's an important part of the character of the change of Juan as a character, because I think it's the first time that he is confronted with his own ugliness. Yeah, so before, everything is fantasy or someone else telling him, but he has not seen that ugliness. It's just a reflection, it's a memory, it's a story. This is his story and this is his actions. And I think that is the weight for him, that he is the ugly in the story, and he's able to see that. Yeah, and probably that is a trigger for later. No, that suddenly, yeah, I'm not anymore this saint, I'm not anymore this helping hand, or I'm not only that. Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking about specifically in the context of the childhood mind, where we make simplistic distinctions between good and bad, where the bad, the ugly is outside of us, and the good is something we bring inside of ourselves. And yes. So, you know, confronting that ugliness inside oneself is where you can no longer make this childish distinction anymore.
Yeah,
but you have to see a more contradictory, you have to see a more ambiguous view, yes. Which at the same time is a huge growth opportunity.
Yeah, totally. And I think that in addition to that, one of the things that I think one is confronted with, which I believe is very important, is that when you have a rigid worldview, whether it's religion or whatever it is, it doesn't matter. The answers are absolute. So they apply equally every time, every situation. But in the experience of Juan, he is aware that his intentions are not evil, but are experienced as that, yeah, by the other. And I think that that is a very important distinction, that in the relational space, it is not about what you want to do. It's not about what you think you're doing. It is also how the other is receiving it, yeah. And unless we share fully 100% the same worldview, there will be an interpretation of my actions that are different from my intention. And I have to learn to negotiate that, yeah. And of course, all this is not happening explicit in the mind of Juan at that time, but it is in this self-defense that he knows he's ugly, but he didn't want to, you know.
No. I was just I think that's an important point. I wanted to bring that up as well, is that when we're talking, and I think this is important when we're talking about these categories of beautiful and ugly and good and evil, yeah, is that it's not like we're dealing with someone who is intentionally evil or trying to intentionally be ugly. It's quite like you said, it's like he simply doesn't know how to interpret the other. He doesn't know how to interpret the woman. And it's from this unknown, it's from this precisely this inability to sense make and this stumbling, where he stumbles upon ugliness inside of himself. He stumbles upon what you might want to consider evil inside of himself. Yeah. But it's not like I am an evil, ugly agent who is
no. That's a very good point, Kata. I think yeah, absolutely. No. Juan, I don't think that comes across as an evil person, or on the contrary, he's a fairly naive individual, clumsy, with a very awkward socialization.
Just too drunk, I don't even know what I'm doing.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a nerdish too in some areas. You know, it has a he's a loner in I think that the clumsiness comes.
I think he needed a wingman. You know, we needed to get Juan a wingman.
Yeah, totally, absolutely. I mean, he's just a very immature person. Yeah, I mean, and I think that's an interesting thing. I think it's the first time that I call this character immature, not because I never thought it was, but because, and that is the interesting thing. If Juan would have continued living his life in Madrid, probably no one would have noticed immaturity. Yeah? I mean,
but this, I think, is an important point to think on, because I think, and to me, I don't know if your reading's the same way, but you might be interested in my reading. It seems to me like the central other actually throughout the entire book is Juan's relation to the mother. Like the mother, even in her absence, is there constantly. And so I would link, like, that's my first hypothesis, and just throw it back to you, is that if he had stayed in Madrid, it's precisely that no one would have noticed the immaturity, because it's in the mother's best interest to not notice the immaturity.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
because even when he's maturing, the mother is guilt tripping him about this and that, you know.
Spot on. I totally agree. I think that without him knowing, his self-image is about his relationship with the mother, and that is how the trauma, or the family secret, distance himself from her, and it's shocking. But indeed, I mean, in what you're saying is absolutely true. First of all, without the distance to the mother and to the capacity to understand that relationship, that very complex relationship, complex mainly for Juan, he cannot mature. Yeah, there's a maturity for Juan is to understand that. Is to understand to what extent his self-image and his self-value is connected to that relationship. Because otherwise he's prisoner of it. And then exactly just what you said. If he had, had he stayed in Madrid and carry on life as he was, because that relationship would have not been put into question, or there's no, the maturity would have not happened. Maybe it would have happened when the mother dies at some point. No, but not in that life. Yeah. Absolutely.
I think it opens a very important conversation. It's unfortunately one that I wanted to bring up with Dr. Boothby in my last conversation, but didn't get a chance to. But he writes about it in his book about the figure of the mother as monstrous, and and specifically the mother's, like in psychoanalysis, like the mother's desire, like the Oedipal mother, and the mother's desire not often being called into question for its pathology in some sense, and specifically like in Juan's context, which I think we can use as a microcosm for a larger context of growing up in a fatherless home or growing up in a place where the father isn't there, is that the mother's desires never put in check in some sense, because in some sense, and this is very I think sometimes strange for people to think about, is that in the same way that a man can have a pathological lust towards a woman, I think oftentimes a mother can have a pathological lust towards the child. Yes. And that lust can consume the child to the point where the child doesn't know their own identity, can't know their own identity.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think that is true for most of us, mothers and fathers, that our desire for our kids to be in a particular way that we recognize as valuable or good is traumatic for our children. Yeah, because we are literally just projecting a worldview into them, without always being careful of how much of our desire actually is congruent with who we are and not with whom we wish we would have been. Yeah, and I think that is. But in the case of Juan, you're absolutely right. I think that the existence of Juan disappears in that family context, because the only thing that values, the only thing that matters is the satisfaction of the mother's desires, or the not only desires, the capacity of the other family members to ease the burden, the satisfaction, the agony of the mother, and all these elements are always the primary element in the family life. Juan is never the first one, never. No, he doesn't know that he can be the first. He doesn't know that he can be loved, without responding to the need of the mother. And I think that is at the core of his insecurity and the sexual repression, because I see it as an intimacy repression, because he doesn't have value as an individual. His only value is in relation to satisfying the needs of the mother, for good and for bad. And he does that very well. So he gets a lot of validation from that relationship too. But the cost of it, is enormous.
Is his development, is his
totally.
It's his let's say his positive development.
Absolutely.
The reference to
your but he is incapable of intimacy outside that relationship. Whether it's at work, whether it's with other people, he doesn't know what to do.
It comes across very strongly in the context of this struggle that one has. I think I like the way you said it in regards to he doesn't know that he can be first. He doesn't know that he can be loved in that way. What I thought, like, so I want to first like frame this also in the context of your writing, because again, your writing captures these cracks, these day-to-day moments, which are oftentimes overlooked in many stories. And one of those aspects that I thought came through very well, and at least resonated profoundly with me on some level, was the way in which, basically what I want to ask you is, when Juan's in China, he doesn't communicate with his mother very much, but again, his mother is present in her absence, and there's a communication which is not communicated. There's there are text messages which go unanswered, for example. There are feelings of guilt in Juan, where he's like, I don't want to respond, but should I respond? And how should, like, am I being ethical here? I'm breaking a link. I need to break a link. I need to do this for me. But I have I'm also confronting a lot of negativity about doing this, and I don't really know. So could you go into what's going on here? Because I think it's very important. And I think a lot of young guys, when they're trying to individuate themselves, can feel this with the mother.
Yeah, and I think that is a process for Juan. No, I think that he's aware. I'm going to say in full, but he is aware that he needs to stay in China for his sanity. For he knows it's a good place for him. He feels good about himself there. He doesn't want anything back. And at the beginning, it's easier to break that because the enemy is the mother. Yeah, so I put the distance. So you're a bad woman. I can't go away, and it's easier. But as the time goes by, and he's more settled in his new life, and that absolute image of a negative mother is just not true. Yeah, so he has to do an effort to defend his individualization without blaming the mother. And I think that is the difficulty of what you were describing, of moments of guilt, moments of, but who is this lady? I want to contact, but I know what is going to happen. If I contact, she's going to say this, and it's going to make me feel bad. So I don't want to contact, but I wish I could contact in a different way. Yeah. So he is trying to figure out how to reposition the mother inside him. And what he's discovering is that is not an easy task, because it doesn't depend only on him. Yeah, I mean, the mother also has always related to him as a way to satisfy her needs, and that's what she wants from him. Yeah, and it's not easy for him, with his level of awareness and the level of awareness of the mother, to have a conversation about that with her. The only way is how I act that, and that is not so obvious. So I think that the difficulty for Juan and for many of us, particularly when you have to change a relationship, and mother-child or parents-children relationship is a very key one, but that also happens when you break up a relationship or a romantic relationship. Yeah, that the new scenario the new relationship can only emerge if we both understand that there is a new relationship. I mean, you need the other to build a new one. Otherwise, you can only defend it by isolating yourself. Yeah, and normally in breakups, there's always a period of a lot of distance, and then there's a point when you can get back to talk.
I was gonna poke on this. I was actually gonna poke on that point. Is that I think, I could be wrong, but I feel like the majority of people who go through a breakup, they are unable to rebuild that sense of a new other, because there's always an asymmetry with the breakup.
Yeah.
A breakup is very rarely we both agree about the breakup. It's usually there's a one-sidedness to the
totally.
And this is difficult to then rebuild the image of the other. And I also wanted to point out what I thought was remarkable. like not only about the growth of Juan in his individuation, but what it seems to me that you're communicating in the book is almost a lack of growth in the mother, because when she messages him back at the end of the book, she's saying things like, but oh, I don't deserve this. And you know, she seems like her dignity is being violated by one individual.
Yes. Yeah, well, I think, yes, I think the mother is a more primary person in the sense that she has delegated the reflection to God. Yeah, so there's no need to self-reflect.
That's a nice point.
Yeah. So she doesn't need to go deep. That God takes care of it for me, and so so she has some superficiality. But there is an important thing in that conversation. Also, you know, the mother also doesn't want to fail that much. You know, there's a self-defense mechanism completely out of her awareness that if he reckons in full what has happened, then the failure is too deep. No, so she needs to defend something of her, say, like, I haven't been that bad to deserve what you say. You know, might be a little bit, but not all. Yeah, because if I accept all what you're saying, then what kind of a mother? No, I mean, I'm such a failure, and I don't think she wants to be exposed to that. She needs to defend also her sanity, and she won't be able to get sanity from reflecting about what has happened. She truly believes she has protected her kids the best she could, and that she doesn't want to challenge that too much. I mean, she understands that for Juan might not be that way, but in a way she regrets that. I think that if we were able to talk with the mother, with Charo, I think that what she says that she regrets that Juan cannot see the value of what she does. She respects his views and still love him because it's his son, his loving child. But in a way, she thinks, yeah, he doesn't understand the way I dealt with it. Yeah, so and that's a part of what she thinks. I don't deserve that because you don't understand me. You know, I've protected you a lot.
I want to keep this conversation as close to the bone as possible. And this is, in some sense, keeping it close to the bone as well. But I just can't help but reflect on what I think is an interesting philosophical point in regards to what you're saying about the mother defending her sanity, and that precisely what allows her to defend her sanity is the displacing of the burden of reflection onto God.
Yeah. Yes.
And precisely if one is to reflect on the concrete actuality of one's intimate life, that one's sanity is actually on the line, is that this was basically Hegel's critique of Kant. That for Hegel, he said that Kant would keep the noumena, or the thing in itself, as almost an unreflective object.
Yeah.
You know, like God, like, I'll put the noumena over there, precisely so that I don't have to do the burden of reflection. And then when I think what opens up, this would be my hypothesis, what opens up in philosophy is like a figure like Nietzsche, where you get madness, you know, like you just get madness come out. Is that okay, I'll reflect on myself. and you get this imminent confrontation with madness, and that this precisely disrupts the Oedipal situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is a very interesting point about madness, because I think that self-reflecting for many of us is a journey to areas that are not well settled, yeah, inside. So yeah, and we pretend that it is normally because our behavior is consistent with our context, and nobody knows, and we can even be unaware of it. But when you start thinking about the origin of some of your desires, and we start looking about some of your fears, and yeah, there are avenues that are difficult to walk, and hatreds and fantasies, and that could be easily labeled as madness. Yeah, and I think that for most of us, I mean, for most of us that have dared to go deep into our minds and our desires, you're very close to madness. And I think that and when you delegate in an external authority, this is like making an initial assumption that by default I am not mad. Yeah, and it's, you don't need to check that anymore, because somewhere externally is saying you're not, and that's the authority. So therefore I don't need to explore it anymore. I'm just not mad. Yeah. While for Juan, unlike the mother, who doesn't have that authority, and that authority has been shattered into pieces, he needs to figure it out. Why do I feel the way I do? And yeah, I mean, and understand that there are some dark areas in his desires, no, and mad areas. I think that the other thing that it is interesting.
Do we get Juan's mad? Do we get to see where in your view do we see the madness of Juan? Is there a moment of the book? Do you think that comes out?
I think that
because he does seem contained, even in some, like I'm thinking about the moment of that really adventure into the rural area of China by himself. He's like, he's still there's contained as well at the same time.
No, he's a very self-controlled individual. I mean, that is clear. But I was thinking in the sense of as regard Juan, I think that Juan's madness is not about losing control. It's about the type of fantasies that he develops or he creates, no? And I think that the madness happens in the relationship with Zhang Yan. Yeah, when his insecurity is there, he's absolutely incapable of breaking from his agony and communicating anything to anybody. He's consumed by his obsession, and he cannot connect with the world. No, he's just feeling betrayed and insecure about that betrayal, and he's just living completely in a fantasy, because he's not relating to her, he's not relating to anybody. And until he breaks that, and the moment he's able to break that, then he realizes to what extent he has just been suffering for nothing or for something. But and I think that for me is the madness, is that his insecurity can be so intense to shape his perception of the world to that point, and not being able to even confront it with the others.
I mean, and that's a, this relationship with, so ultimately Juan develops an intimate relationship with Zhang Yan.
Yeah.
Is that how you pronounce the name? Zhang Yan?
Zhang Yan, yeah.
Yeah, Zhang Yan. And so, that relationship is seems to me to be the it's like the relationship with the mother on the one hand, and the relationship with Zhang Yan on the other hand. And what's going on in his first confrontation with ugliness, then what's going on in his development, do you think, as the book unfolds?
Yes, I think that Zhang Yan for Juan is acceptance. Yeah, what he receives from her is just pure, simple acceptance, without any condition, and not in the sense of unconditional
love.
He
fights for the acceptance, right? Because she doesn't. He's worried about her. He's worried about her trusting him.
Yeah, I think that, but he's not expecting acceptance. I think that surprised him. I think that what he's expecting is forgiveness. Yeah?
Yes,
and he wants that. He wants that forgiveness because it's heavy on him, and what he receives lately is acceptance, and that is what he has never had before, because he's been invisible to his needs. So suddenly he can be an incomplete, ugly, imperfect individual, and is accepted, as valuable. He's accepted as a friend. Yeah, and I think that that is the origin of his love. No, he receives something that it is new to him, and because of the origin of how the relationship started, and that ugliness that we were talking in the relationship between them, also the relationship is very different, because while with the mother he's a saint, the relation with Zhang Yan is already starting as an evil, yeah, in a way. So he doesn't have to defend his sameness at all, because the other person has already seen the ugliness. So that is liberating for him, and that is what allows him to have a more a relationship of proximity with Zhang Yan. Not necessarily intimacy at the beginning, but just proximity. Yeah, which with the other people he can't. Yeah, I mean, with most of the other characters, there is a gap between the way he relates and the way he thinks about the other people.
Yeah, that's clear as well.
But not with Zhang Yan. With Zhang Yan, there is a coherence between the way he relates and the way he thinks about her. Yeah.
I was just thinking another dimension where, we were saying about psychoanalysis and religion, where Juan is not religious, but the unconscious believes for him, is the homophobia, you could say.
Yeah, totally.
Well, and so I mean, that's an example of a relationship which comes up in I think the second part of the book, where Juan is in Beijing, and I think to me, talking about that dimension of things which Juan is disturbed by.
Yes.
In my view, I wanted to bring this up in a larger context of the book, which was about the ambiguity about truth when it comes to revealing and concealing, because there are a few moments in the book, both between Juan and, forget the man's name, but the homosexual man,
Andres. Andres. Yeah.
Yes, and so there's this. I think you're trying to tell me what you think, but I think what I read into it is this weird, ambiguous dynamic between revealing the truth and concealing the truth.
Yes. So two things. One is about the homophobia, and that is intentional there, because for many people, we live in a world of politically correctness, that everything has to be so. For many people that have been brought up in very traditional environments, when you ask them about whether you're homophobic or not, they will say definitely not, because I have nothing against. But when it comes to the reality of it, when it comes to you having to relate and having to love and having to engage, then it is more difficult than if it were not an homosexual in front of you. Yeah, and I think that is what happens to Juan. He initially has. Why would he care? I mean, he has no friends, nothing. So why would it be an issue for him? But he comes from a particular worldview where that is not accepted, and when that is in front of him, you don't know what to do with it, because it should be a bad thing. It's somewhere, no? But you don't know exactly why it's a bad thing. It's a bad thing because it's a bad thing, but you don't know exactly what to do. And I think that there is a lot of it in our homophobic behavior, the same way that I think it's in our chauvinistic, macho-like behaviors, that only when you're confronted to them, then you realize, but it's this micro chauvinism that that you have to be exposed to it before you realize. And then the other thing that I think is very important, and is that none of us reveal the truth of what we are to all of us, to everyone, not even to our close partners.
Could we?
I don't think we could. I don't know how would that be.
There's something, it seems to me, and this is something that like genuinely is like a perplexing thing to think. I don't know if we have a final answers or something, but the way in which the truth involves both revealing and concealing.
Yes.
Do you think?
Absolutely, and I think it's a beautiful question. Could we? I don't think we can, because we would have to trace back so many things to put onto the other that we'll lose track of what we're talking about. I mean, it's just like it is impossible. But
I've encountered there is a part of us which might be described as like the first oppositional reaction to naivete, where you have this idea that it's almost like an Adam and Eve cognition, where you're thinking the truth is just nakedness, right? Like if I just take off all my clothes, if I just reveal all my truth, that's the truth. Well, I don't think that's the truth.
No. I mean, in that image, which is very nice, it would be great. Then there is no space for contradiction. But we have contradictory feelings. I can love and hate the same person at the same time. So how I do communicate exactly that? I mean, there is also I don't know. At least in my experience, it is very difficult to communicate your inner world. What exactly you are experiencing about someone else, for example. And I think that is something that I wanted to evoke in the relationship between Juan and Andres, that while he benefits a lot from that relationship, there is something in the inner world that he dislikes and he doesn't know where to put. And he chooses not to communicate. He chooses not to share. And by not sharing it, he shapes the relationship in a direction that he might not want to, but he doesn't know what to do with it. But the thing is that everything that he communicates, I think, is true. It's just not the whole truth. I mean, there is a part of him that he chooses not to share, and in the book is obvious. What part is it? But I think that it is not so obvious in our daily life, in our relationships. We always choose not to share a part of ourselves. We always, and I'm not sure that is a conscious choice. Is something inaccessible.
So let's try to play with this for a sec, because I think it's super important. So in our daily lives, with our partners, with our families, there are, of course, a certain dimension of the truth, which is purely practical. Like to make the bed, to do the laundry, to do, to get the groceries, to pay the bills, all these types of practical truths, which we do to keep things going, and that's a part of the truth. Now, if I'm just to simply analyze the wealth of my inner content, the people around me, the people you live with, they look at you externally and can see you externally. And this is me, you see me every day. What's going on inside is a torrent of emotion.
It's...
And if I was to communicate the entire torrent of that emotion, it seems to me like it would make the practical reality impossible. Like it would just be a constant emotional breakdown of,
But not only that. I mean, I totally agree. I mean, if I have to describe real time what is going on for me every second, I mean, no one will want to be around me. I mean, that's I mean, they will be bored of it. But also, this is this naivety that if I say what I think and how I feel, that the other person will understand. And that is, there is a chance, but the other person receives the things through their own reality. So it doesn't matter how naked I am. I mean, the other person will choose what to look at. I mean, and if I give you one input, then I'm more capable of controlling and exploring that input with you. If I give you 1 million, you will choose 3 out of 1 million that I don't know exactly which one you have chosen, because I've given you a lot. So I have no idea of what sort of an image have you developed of Jon in your head, no? And why you choose that, or there is that is why relationships are so complex and so difficult, and parents-children relationship. It is because there's a lot of assumptions that we actually share common understandings. That is not true. Yeah, that there is that because the alignment happens in the practical life. You know, as you said, we all like to go to particular shops to do the grocery, and we like the same movies, and there is an assumption that we are all similar, but we're not. And
this crucial dimension of the asymmetry of the understanding, we want a symmetry of the understanding, but it's hard to reconcile ourselves with this gap in the understanding. And I just say quickly, because I'd be interested to know your view on it, is one of the most surprising experiences for me in publishing work and becoming cited and stuff like that is the other person's interpretation of the work. Is like, you know, you write something, and of course you write a fiction book, and what you're open to, you told me, is just the diversity of unexpected interpretations of the book.
It is, and I think that is easier with fiction than if you try to write science or history, or because you're aiming for some accuracy, so you want that the understanding is you're not aiming for that in fiction, so you just people receive it. But it is very interesting because yes,
it's very liberating in some sense. It sounds very liberating.
It is both liberating and it can be frustrating in a way, because now we're having a conversation. You've read the book, and obviously your interest in psychoanalysis and psychology at large, and philosophy, and it makes you connect with elements of the book and the characters that make you think and make you reflect of what might be my intentions behind, and whether we agree or not, it doesn't matter. The conversation is about what are those big themes, but if a person doesn't have that interest, the book is about a guy that walks in the street, and that's it. I mean, it is, and that can be frustrating in a way that I mean, is liberating in realizing that you don't own the story anymore. The story is the story of other people. It's not your story. It's a story that is out there, but at the same time, like you write with an intention. No?
Sometimes I feel like it's the closest a man can get to giving birth. It's like, you know, because you give birth to the book, and then your child is walking around out there subject to the other's interpretations. And,
in a way, yes. But you know, that's also very interesting, because as an author, this is the first one I published in Spanish, but it's the 6th novel that I wrote, and that was very interesting, because when I published, a lot of people made that analogy of my creation as my book as a child, and I thought a lot about that, because well, I have children, I know how to treat them, but it's very interesting because for me, I'm enjoying this conversation a lot, but I think there's one of the few occasions that I've enjoyed talking about my books. Probably because we're not talking about the content of the book, but we're talking about the higher elements around that build the book in a way, but it has nothing to do with the story as such. But normally my relationship with the books is that once they're out, I just don't want to hear anything about them, and it's just like
I think we're using the content as a window.
Yes. But that I'm delighted, but it's normally not the case. No, people want to talk about the elements, and there are two things that I normally don't enjoy. The first one is that if someone has read or has interpreted the book in a particular way, I don't want to share my interpretation. How does it help? I mean, in a way, I mean, you enjoy, that's what you thought, then that's the book for you, and it doesn't matter too much. I mean, if it's true or not, that's it. I find it sad that I have to correct anybody or to amplify or to what is the experience of particular elements of the book. The other part is that if we were looking at the things as they are written, I would immediately start feeling insecure, because I always, when I read what I've done, I think I could do better. So I find it very, very disturbing to get back to the actual writing of the book. I prefer that nobody mentions it. It's like, it's there. So it's like more than having a son, it's like having a kind of a demon that is out of my body and it's out.
I like that as well. We can go with that. I mean, there's a few things I could say on that, but there's also a few aspects of the end of the book that stuck out to me, which I wanted to bring up with you, and I thought were important to zero in on in some sense. And they're connected to things we've already discussed. But the first one is this, what seemed to me very pronounced in Juan at the end of the book, is this resolving the feeling of invisibility in his relationship with Zhang Yang.
Yeah.
And I want to connect that a little bit with something you said earlier, which was, and in this sort of polarity we've been discussing about the mother and Zhang Yang, is that with the mother, Juan is seen as a saint. Yeah. And then with Zhang Yang, you're saying from the beginning, he's seen as evil or ugly. And paradoxically, that means that he can be seen in a way that the mother's not able to see him. And that this leads to, at the end of the book, he literally links this feeling to the end of the journey, that the end of the journey is no longer feeling invisible. I'd like you to get to comment on that a little bit.
Yes. I think that comes back to what we were saying earlier on about the relationship mother-child, no? And in this case, the family construct is about satisfying the mother's needs. It's not about satisfying one's need. And therefore, one's needs are invisible, are unknown, possibly even to Juan himself. Yeah, what he needs is to...
I think that's true.
That's true.
I think they're invisible to Juan himself.
Yeah, I think they are. Yeah, I mean, he has some... And the relationship with Zhang Yang forces him to express his needs. Yeah? And also the character of Zhang Yang she wants to know. Yeah. So in a very carefree, a person that's surprisingly with the baggage that is probably similar to Juan's is incredibly free from it. Yeah. In the way she relates to it, and I think that is the healing part for Juan. So obviously the acceptance of Zhang Yang is, I wouldn't say that is healing, is the trigger to say, oh, there's another path. Yeah, but the healing part is that capacity to to have someone who attends to his needs, and that is being taken into account. And I think that the real moment for him is to realize that the person doesn't need to be taking care of his needs all the time. And when the person stops, can come back also to care of the needs if you ask for help, yeah, which he doesn't know how to do either, yeah. And I think that is the healing part, that he doesn't need to be visible all the time. Well, obviously at the beginning with Zhang Yang he is, and then he feels great. But then as the relationship evolves, there is this discontinuity in the relationship, which he finds disturbing, but he comes back to it, no? And that is I think that is at the point where he relaxes, no? That he knows that this is kind of a ping pong game, no? That it's not about being fully invisible, it's not about being fully visible, it's about engaging, and that engagement is always work in progress. It's not and he thinks about that from the way he comes, that the reason for that is that he's broken. Yeah, he thinks of his childhood and changes, and it's kind of, there is something broken in me, and therefore that is why it has to be that way. John, no, Juan, I think it's always the case, regardless whether you're broken or not broken. Yeah, but for Juan, the only way to make sense of it is to say, oh, yeah, I mean, I was broken, I was invisible, and then the result is that I can only live with this discomfort of sometimes being invisible, instead of just accepting that that's the way things are, no? Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that leads into the next thing I wanted to bring up, specifically in regards to this accepting of the ping pong game, because I think it's one of the let's say surprising turning points of the book, which I think is crucial at the end, which is, at the same time as Juan thinks at the time Juan thinks the journey is over, I'm no longer invisible, and you've linked that to sort of Zhang Yan accepting him. I feel like the big turning point at the end of the book is actually that Juan's confronted with accepting her. Yeah. And precisely that, there's something that Zhang Yan reveals about herself and her past, which Juan at first finds disturbing and doesn't understand. Yeah. And one of the things that I thought was profound, actually, that this is what I wanted to quote from Zhang Yan, is the wound is me. Yeah. You either accept me as the wound, or you don't accept me. And so this is, to me, also bringing our conversation full circle, because it's, Juan the saint who doesn't have a wound and is just good and is just self-sacrificing. Yeah. And now confronted with not only his wound, but also has to accept the other's wound as the condition for a loving relationship, which I think is very nice.
Yes. And I think that the positive of the relationship with Zhang Yang is what allows him to accept Zhang Yang. He's not willing to lose what he had before.
Yeah, he says explicitly he never wants to let her go.
I mean, this I've never had this experience. I don't want to lose that. And yeah, he had to accept in the other what he knows that he's been accepted in him. Yeah, so he's been on the receiving end of being accepted, and then suddenly, so accepting is more than just abstract love. It's a choice. Yeah, and I think that is an element of maturity for him, because before, love is kind of a romantic thing. It's something, again, that is more passive. You are loved by the way you are, and it's in the other. But the choices are vague. The choice becomes when he has to choose, and he choose. I choose for you, and that, yeah, you tell me that's what it is, and I accept it. Yeah, and that's not romantic anymore, no.
Can I bring up a distinction on this relationship between a passive romantic love and love as a choice, which I like the distinction, but also bringing in the unconscious, and precisely the unconscious as it relates to Juan and Zhang Yan is, he's confronted with the choice of accepting her wound, but on some level, do you think the unconscious has already chosen Zhang Yan? Like his unconscious chose her, and then he has to choose her consciously in that moment. What do you think about that?
I think that in the inner world of one, there are two forces. Yeah, one that is this desire to choose Zhang Yan and be with her, and the other one that he's terrified of the impurity, of the imperfection, because he has lived all his life with very big hypotheses, assumptions, not real life. Yeah, even with the relationship with the mother, it's based on very big words and reflected. So I think he's terrified of that, and he's terrified that in that imperfection, then there is no room for him. Then if it's not true love, then I'm going to be invisible again. Yeah, I mean, I'm visible because it's true love. If it's not true love, then what? Yeah, and I think that that's what he's able to overcome with the help of Zhang Yan, is that, I mean, you're never going to be fully visible to anybody, and that's okay. I mean, you don't have to. You also,
it's like accepting the incompleteness of visibility as the very condition of possibility for visibility.
Yes, absolutely. But because he comes from invisibility to visibility, what he has loved in Zhang Yan until that moment is the visibility. And I think that is the choice he makes, that he has loved a fantasy. When Zhang Yan reveals what she is, not because she intends to change anything, just because it is, then one has to love the person, not the fantasy anymore that person creates in him. And that is that requires forgiveness, that requires acceptance, that requires the understanding of imperfection and discontinuity. I decide to be with this person, and this person is just a person with all this discontinuity. And I think that the maturity of that point is what allows him to accept the mother. And the moment he understands that in order to love Zhang Yan, he has to love the person, not the fantasy. I don't know, he arrives to that level of reflection, but that's how he experienced. Yeah. It's also the realization that there is a space for the mother, because the mother is also incomplete and imperfect, and he has to make a choice about it too.
Okay, so winding down here, thank you for that reflection. I think that also is just a nice full circle for the conversation. And I think we've approached many different angles of the book and the narrative of the book, yes, I think quite well. So for those who are interested in picking up the book, which I'll link in the description, The Angle of Happiness, you'll have this at least as giving maybe some insight into some of the psychological, psychoanalytic, philosophical dimensions, which I think the book explores implicitly through the story. Now, the book is told in 3 parts. If we put it in space and time, it's about a year. Yeah. And on one side of the world and on the other side of the world. And in those 3 parts, you just label them in the book by the space and the time locations. But is there an emotion or a theme in each of the 3 parts which you think correlates to these 3 parts?
Yeah, I think that they are. So the first part is the struggle. Yeah, I mean, is Juan, not only how is how Juan deals with life and the crisis in his life. The second part is hope. Yeah, it's the fantasy. It's the fantasy that the world can be better, that he can be better. And I think that the third part is reality. Yeah, is how how all for him gets back to the pragmatic elements of living. Yeah, this and how that parts come into place for him. Yeah. So for me, it will be struggle, hope, and reality.
I love that. Thanks for offering that. I mean, and then the struggle is like related to the image breaking.
Yes.
And then the hope is like building something new from ground zero.
Yes.
And then reality is just dealing with the,
it's just integration. No, I think that is integration of both the struggle and the new image.
I think it would be interesting also to, so there's quite a as far as I'm aware, quite a famous author who's given you some endorsement for the book, Felix J. Palma, who's the author of The Map of Time, which I saw you snuck that into the book itself. Is there anything you'd like to say about, Felix J. Palma says, Jon extracts the epic from daily life, which I love that.
Me too. I'm honored that he said that. Yeah, I mean, Felix is a well-known author. He was a bestseller and mentioned in the New York Times, and he's a very imaginative writer, science fiction, and I would be forever grateful to him. That he is the reason that I started publishing, because before that I was obviously no one in my immediate context is a writer or has any context with that, so I had no idea of the quality of my writing, or I always felt that I could do better, but I didn't know where I was. And just for pure accident, Felix got a copy of the manuscript of this book, and he said, "Jon, this has to be published." And I continue in communication with him. I mean, he's a person that I can call my mentor when it comes to the writing world. He is for those who like science fiction and fantasy, his books are just stunning. He's an incredibly imaginative writer. I mean, he's a very creative mind. He's I like to talk myself about more than a writer as a storyteller. I mean, I am more interested in the story and the characters. Felix is also a craftsman of the language. He's very careful with metaphors, with language. He's superb. But the thing that stands out from Felix J. Palma for me is his generosity. I mean, I would have never dreamed that an author that renowned and known in the Spanish world would invest a second in me and no one, and he did. He just had the humbleness to read my text and call me. So and that speaks volumes of his personality and his generosity.
Well, thanks. Good thing Felix did, because we got ourselves a good book, I think, as a result. And not only a good book, but I think an emerging author in your own right? Because you've got not only this book now out, but you got another book coming out in English, already out in Spanish. And so what should people, not only go Jon Echanove, pick up The Angle of Happiness. Again, I'll leave the link in the description, but what should people be looking out for coming out around the corner?
Yes, well, already in Spanish, we have the second book, which is published by a publishing house called Libros y Literatura. It's again is a novel about also the growth, the internal growth of characters. But in this case, I explore more with the lives, the interconnected lives of three characters, how our context defines how we see the world, what we believe is success, what we believe is ethical and not ethical, and how that clashes in between these three characters. And it's based in the Philippines, a place I loved and enjoyed, and we lived there. And Philippines, in particular Manila, was a wonderful place to describe the gaps between the poor and the rich, and how that that very pragmatic difference changes dramatically what you can achieve and you see life. And that is the plan. That's the Plans of God. Is available in Spanish and will be in English by the end of the year, in the last quarter. And probably in the course of this year, I'll publish the third novel, historical fiction in the early 17th century in Spain, that explores the less known part of the trade relationships, yeah, and the power relationships between the rich people in those at that time trade routes to Asia and to the Americas. Yeah.
And will we get a book ever that's set in Brussels?
We probably, I have a couple of stories I have that are based here in where I live in Brussels, and interviewed in a little village. But I probably will need to wait a bit, because maybe people will feel too recognized about what it is. Now, one of the things that I enjoy a lot is to describe things as I see them, and that happens with China. In the Philippines, in the Plans of God, is about describing what it is to be there. I invested an enormous amount of time researching what was Sevilla in the 17th century, and I think that some parts of this, in the third novel, some parts of the book are really good in evoking what was to live in that context. And I think that if I write something about Brussels or Belgium, I'll bring that part also, that I cannot just create elements that don't exist in the city, but I have to live with the things that are in the city, and that includes the people, no? So maybe I have to wait a bit or find a way to hide it a bit.
Okay. Well, at least I can say that when your second book's out in English, I'd love to bring you back on and have a conversation about that one. So looking forward to that very much. And thank you so much for coming on and having this conversation, being so open in your writing, and so detailed and so attentive to detail in your writing. And again, I think that the aspect of your book, apart from having the chance to talk to you about this meta oscillation between the mother and the lover, and the relationship between that's going on in Juan's character, I just really, again, appreciated the attention to detail in that day to day. And I think, I don't really need to say much more than Felix J. Palma here to say that Jon extracts the epic from daily life. I think that says it pretty well. So thank you so much, Jon. Is there any last thing you'd like to tell the viewers? Otherwise, it's been a pleasure.
I no, to the viewers, that if you need anything, you can always, through Carol, reach out to me. And hopefully you have enjoyed the conversation. But I think the last words is for you, Carol. Thanking you, all my gratitude for giving me this space and having had such a fun, interesting conversations. I'm looking forward to another one.
Well, it's always, since I've met you, Jon, it's always been a pleasure, and can't wait to read your next book. So everyone, The Angle of Happiness, this has been Jon Echanove, and we're signing off. See you later, Jon.